Hey there, friends. Welcome back to As Man Thinketh on UNAS TV. So earlier this year, the internet was abuzz, no pun intended, because the city of Santa Rosa had given a code violation to a 9-year-old for raising hobby bees in his backyard. Stuff is ridiculous. It's like the state of Washington's Department of Ecology issuing a $100,000 fine and lien against an 85-year-old's property for growing hay. If you haven't watched that video, I suggest you watch it. That guy needs help. The only way we can get him help is to amplify his story. In this case, the 9-year-old has parents who have stepped in to help, as well as the Santa Rosa Beekeepers Association. But not everybody has help. A lot of these bureaucratic policies target these hopeless people. And for what reason? They were acting on a complaint. We don't know where that complaint came from. The complaint was made back in April. But basically, somebody complained that this 9-year-old was raising bees, because bees are a horrible thing. You know, it's interesting that around that time, there were a lot of stories coming out about bee attacks. I actually did a video on bee attacks. But for the most part, bees are pretty harmless, and they're extremely useful. If you have flowering gardens, they help pollinate your flowers. What would Santa Rosa actually be like if it didn't have any honeybees? I also understand from raising bees myself that sometimes if you don't have like the correct water sources near the hive or things like that, they can become rather annoying because they'll go into people's pools or your own pool. That happened to us. And my family complained to me about my bees. But I fixed the situation. The actual complaint was filed against the 9-year-old for having a home occupation. I didn't know that 9-year-olds had home occupations, but apparently this 9-year-old is quite the entrepreneur. But the family has actually been very clear about this. This isn't their 9-year-old's business. It's not running a Fortune 500 company out of their backyard. It's just a hobby, an educational hobby. Would we rather our kids be sitting around on iPads? Don't answer this, California. Everybody else answer it. Or would we rather our kids be working outside in the yard, building things, raising bees? Most of us who live outside of the tech center of the world would prefer that our kids are outside doing things. This brings back one major déjà vu. Of just a year before this happened, in January of 2024, we talked about how a 16-year-old was threatened practically with arrest for raising bees on her property. Now, she was actually operating a business. She had the right to do so. What they got her on was putting down gravel to build out her apiary without having a permit. You can't put down gravel. That's building without a permit. You know how many times I go to the quarry, grab dump trailer loads of gravel to build out areas to keep things clean and safe for my family and kids on our property? I know I live on a farm and I'm not living in a neighborhood, but it's not like she was pouring concrete pads here. She was using gravel to keep a clean apiary space. Now here's the thing, is it's not even illegal to raise bees in Santa Rosa, California. It's not. There's nothing in their code that says you can't raise bees. The actual wording in the code falls under home occupation. You're not allowed to have a beekeeper operation for income in Santa Rosa. So whoever decided to actually send this letter of code enforcement to this family of this 9-year-old didn't even bother to do their own research. They didn't even bother to look into whether or not there was a code violation there. And this is the largest problem that I see with these bureaucratic agencies. You have these people who are sitting behind these desks. I'd like to think that they're intelligent. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're just programmed. They get a complaint, and without even investigating it, they say, oh, you can't do that because you can't run a bee business out of your house. But there is nothing in the code that says that they cannot have hobby bees. Santa Rosa would like to remind everybody that there's nothing in the code that says they're allowed to have honeybees. But it's not a code violation simply to raise honeybees. There's nothing in the code that says raising bees in your backyard, your 9-year-old having a beehive is violating the code. So this is why this has come back up in conversation now. It's because they're actually trying to insert wording into the county code or the town code that would basically allow hobbyists to raise honeybees. Until that wording is in there, hobbyists are kind of hanging out there in limbo. Are they allowed to have bees? Are they not allowed to have bees? And then you've got these code enforcement officers taking it on a case-by-case basis. Clearly don't do their own investigative work. I mean, come on, they thought a 9-year-old was running a business in his parents' backyard. I'm not saying that 9-year-olds don't do really good lemonade stands. What I'm saying is that even if this 9-year-old were selling some of his honey, I think it hardly qualifies as a business. And there is nothing wrong with young entrepreneurs learning about entrepreneurship, in my perspective. But according to the family, that's not even the case. He's just raising them as a hobby. Maybe he's giving away the excess honey to family and friends. That didn't matter to the code enforcement officer. All the code enforcement officer cared about was their opportunity to threaten and penalize a 9-year-old. Bureaucratic agencies shouldn't be allowed to just issue code enforcement fines and penalties just because there are gray areas in the law. They don't have that capability. Nobody ever gave them the capabilities they have in the first place. This 9-year-old is helping his community with pollination, biodiversity. He's providing honey, whether or not it's paid or not. He's providing honey, which is an incredible nutrient source, and especially for those who live in the area who have allergies, local honey is really important if you can get your honey locally. And I think, raising honeybees for that reason is a right. I think it should be a right. And I'm going to do a different video on this, whether or not we actually have the right to grow our own food. I mean, this is something you see pop up all across the U.S. on a regular basis with people with backyard flocks and all sorts of things. But he should be allowed to raise bees for his own use, his own purpose, his own family's use. And like I said, they're not explicitly saying, well, no, you can't do that for personal use. What they did was they hit him with a code violation that falls under home occupancy laws when it comes to operating a business, where it says beekeeping isn't allowed. If you like flowers, if you like raising vegetables, if you like anything that involves pollinators, living life food, don't live in Santa Rosa. Anyway, guys, this was an interesting story, worth an update, especially given what we're seeing kind of across the country with a lot of these random code violations and people who are just clearly passing them out without doing their own research, understanding the full complexity of the issue before they just decide to hammer somebody. 9-year-old's a really easy target. The point is that what they're doing now could change the dynamics of Santa Rosa. It could allow, if passed, if they're able to get the wording in there, it could solidify the right for people to have beehives on their own property, whether that be to get honey to help them with their allergies, to help them with their ailments, because honey does a lot of those things, or whether it's just because they want to pollinate their flower beds. And, I think if they did adapt wording, then they could also add in there some requirements of understanding how to operate an apiary so that you have less issues with bees going into people's pools and grandmas getting attacked. Like I said, there was something odd at the beginning of the year with all of the honeybee attacks that were going on. And I'm not just talking about the Africanized bees. I think it made a lot of people fearful of bees. But there's nothing really to be afraid of with bees. I mean, I walk around my beehives every day. They've never attacked me unless I go in there for the honey. But in those cases, I'm usually wearing a bee suit. Sometimes they can be feisty. Sometimes they don't care. It just depends on the day. But point is that bees are, for the most part, harmless. They buzz around us. They're not like wasps, or they're not like yellow jackets. They actually don't want to sting you. And they're extremely helpful to our environment and our ecosystem. They may not be native to North America, although there was a honeybee at one point in time that was native to North America, long time ago, long far extinct. But as we see the loss of other pollinators, honeybees are a great alternative, and they're manageable. Anyway, guys, I just wanted to share a story. I'm interested to see what happens there in Santa Rosa and whether or not they actually put this wording in there to protect hobby beekeepers and people that are doing good things for our ecosystem, especially young 9-year-olds who are just learning about insects. And I think it's important to recognize these government agencies, their lack of oversight, and the trigger-happy code enforcement officers out there that just pull the trigger without doing proper investigation into things. Where are their fines? I feel like they should be fined for harassment. Personal opinion. Many of you have noticed that we keep wearing these leather patch hats that say Defend the Right to Farm on them. These leather patch hats support our nonprofit, Meet My Neighbor Productions. You can get your hat at Yanasa Trading Co. and help us defend the right to farm through education, outreach, and, as we've been doing over the last couple of years, farm relief efforts. So get your leather patch hat and let others know that you defend the right to farm.